Good morning. I wanted to take some time today to talk to you about condition codes. We talk about condition codes with our students, and sometimes I think they just nod because they don't want anyone to know they don't know what we're talking about. So I want to take just a few minutes to talk to you about what those are. So when a scorer looks at your material, it has to be scorable. If it's not scorable, then they don't score it. So essentially, you have an incomplete or a 0 for that task or for a particular rubric in a task. So at most places, most schools, if you have a condition code, that's going to bring your score in as an incomplete. So you might have done a great job with task 1, great job with task 3, but then you've got these condition codes maybe in task 2, and now you've got to take task 2 over. And that's a problem, as you know, because once you leave your program, you need a classroom to do it in. So that is why today I'm going to take a little time and talk about this, how we can avoid them. First of all, the condition codes come in letters. So you've got condition code A, B, C, D, and then it'll say A1, whatever. And this is just a list of them, but this right here is available on edTPA website for you. The condition code A, that's given in a planning commentary, excuse me, a task 1. If you have fewer than 3 lesson plans that are submitted, and for those of you teaching middle grades or secondary, well, actually middle school or secondary, if you're teaching a large time block and you've indicated that in your context for learning, and that, blocks usually are like 90 minutes, right? And if you send in less than 3, if it looks like your lesson plans cover less than 3 hours of instruction, well then you're going to have to you'll probably get a condition code. However, don't get yourself too worried about this. Make your lesson plans, have 3 lesson plans, 3 to 5 for your learning segment, and you'll probably be good to go. This really is just for people who've got large blocks. Okay. After you have uploaded your video onto the Pearson platform, and that'll happen on upload day, you have a chance to go back and play your video. And you need to do that to make sure that it can be seen. Because if your video cannot be played at all, or if the technical quality of it is so bad that the scorer can't really see what's going on, that's a condition code. Same with audio. You want to make sure that the scorer can hear. And there's things going on in the environment, like if you're in an auditorium, a gymnasium, or a pool, or if you put your camera next to a heating vent, or a student who constantly taps on his desk, that can ruin your audio. Remember that microphones on a camera don't discriminate between important and unimportant sounds. So be aware of that. Now, in the world of wearing masks, there is going to be inaudible portions. So you will need to include a written transcript at the end of your commentary on task 2 or task 3, wherever you've got the video, and to make sure that the scorers can see what it said. All right, the condition code D. you can't leave any of your prompts blank. Or if you write a prompt that does not answer the question, that could be a condition code D. They can't score it if you're talking about something completely unrelated to the task, right? You need to make sure that the total times of your clips are not less than 3 minutes. Now this is all in your artifact chart in the back of your handbook, which if you're not looking at, can I just take a moment and say, what are you thinking? Okay, you really need to be looking at your artifact chart. So many of your questions are answered by looking at that. Materials that have to be translated into English should be added to the original materials in the same file. Like for instance, and we'll talk about that in a minute. If you have a Spanish translation to an English document in your instructional file, put them together. Oftentimes, students will load up the wrong file into a designated location. For example, they may inadvertently put an academic language video file in a feedback, in a work sample spot, and that won't work. They might just put the wrong, like you've got your lesson plans and they've put instructional materials there. It's got to be in the right place, and you get the opportunity to go back and check this, and you really need to do that. If your file is blank, there's nothing on it, that would be a condition code. Or if they can't open it. Now here it says if documents are illegible, and this is talked about in your handbooks. So of course you're going to have illegible documents if you've got kindergarten or preschool or in some special education situations. So if you have a work sample where the student's writing is illegible, then you need to have at the bottom really what amounts to a translation. So you need to transcribe what it was that the student was saying. Now I see this a lot. Students will say, oh, well, I use this website. And so they will just insert the hyperlink into their lesson plan or into their instructional materials. And that's not going to work because the scorers, when they look at your work, they don't open up the Word document. They don't download your Word document or your PDF, and they can't click on your hyperlinks. It's all up there in a tiny little box. That's what they see. So they don't get to click on those things. So if you've used a website, what I would do is I would put the name of the website and a description of what's on the website and how it was used. I definitely do not just put hyperlinks. That'll get you condition code. Don't forget that your video clips in task 2 must be continuous. Now, of course, if you've videotaped a 90-minute class and you're only allowed 2 20 minutes, well, a total of 20 minutes or 2 10-minute clips, then of course you're going to go out and you're going to clip out 10 minutes and clip out 10 minutes. That's acceptable. So when we say unedited, we mean you can't take a minute and a half from the beginning and 3 minutes at the end and 2 minutes here and 3 minutes there of all your best stuff and smash them together. You can't do that. So let's say that you have one of those ridiculously conceived classes where it's split. You have a split class because of lunch. So you have them for 45 minutes before lunch and a waste of 30 minutes after lunch. So if you've had a split class, which you can tell that I have, you know that last 30 minutes is a complete total waste of time. So if you're beginning to tape at the in the first 45 minutes before lunch, and you want to continue taping after lunch, that's just not going to work, because that would not be continuous activity. Or if you've done an activity and then you give the students a long time to read a passage, and then you realize, okay, I can't have 10 minutes of my students reading, you can't edit that out. So keep these things in mind as you're planning. You can't edit out disruptive behavior or any of those kinds of things. You want to make sure that your face appears at least once in your video clips. So I'm always telling students to turn and look at the camera. At least, at least a profile, but it's better if you can do just a full look at the camera at least once. So keep doing that as you're taping a whole class. Just keep turning and looking and making sure people can see you. You do need to know that when we say no editing, it is acceptable to caption certain portions of your file, so you can put in captions of what students said if they're inaudible. That's pretty time consuming, but it might be worth it, especially in an era where it's really when it's really hard to understand what people are saying. Okay, you wouldn't think you'd have to bring this up, but we do. If you're teaching English, then you need to videotape English instruction. If you have signed up for a PE edTPA assessment, then don't submit health education. That's not going to work. So you want to make sure that whatever you've signed up for with your content area, it needs to be the same as your license, and that's what your instruction is. If you're going in Tennessee for a 612 license and you're in a middle school teaching 7th grade, you don't choose the middle grade's handbook. You're getting licensed in 612, you need to get the 612 handbook. Be careful about that. That's some confusion with people. You want to make sure that your artifacts are related to your central focus. There is a minimum group size. Now, often with online instruction, we recommend that you have small groups for synchronous online instruction. You can get more out of the students if they're in small groups, but make sure you don't have fewer than 4. Almost everybody's handbook says you have to have 4. Now, that's not true for special education, and it may not be true for early childhood. I'm not positive about early childhood. Student work samples need to be the same for your focus students. Now, I'll come back to that in just a second. I get this a lot because people want to do modified assessments, and that's acceptable, but you want to make sure that your assessments are assessing the same thing. So let's say, for example, you're giving an assessment on World War I, and you want your students to write an essay, and you've given specific instructions. Well, you can change those instructions to modify it for students who maybe are gifted, or maybe students who are struggling with their writing. You can change the expectations, but you can't change what you're assessing. And so just be really careful with that. I have people sometimes who say, I want to do a menu where everybody does something different. No. Don't do that. Don't do that. I love that idea. It's great for maybe another assessment, but not for task 3. You want to have work sample evidence that really shows what the students know and can do. So that's not a student survey or a self-assessment that the students do, and it's not a peer assessment, and it's not work completed by a group. So that's a critical mistake that's made by a lot of folks. So you want to make sure that the assessment is an assessment that you complete on one student, each individual student. Make sure if you do work samples that are videos, that they meet the handbook requirements that are in your back of your handbook, and that applies to your physical. You need to look at physical education if you're there. Translations. Okay, so if, for instance, you are teaching third grade and you've got a student in there that you're giving materials to that are in another language, you might need to, in some circumstances, give translations and translated transcripts to some materials. This does not apply to these folks. For example, if you're world language or classical language, you don't have to provide English translation for your Spanish stuff that you're using, or your Greek. Some people with these they have bilingual placements. So all of these types of things, they don't have these requirements. Everybody needs to check out their own handbook about that. Okay, condition H. It says this is the condition code that you get, and it's for transcripts of materials written or recorded in a language of instruction other than English are not provided. Now remember, that doesn't apply to a lot of you, but for some of you, it does apply, and so you need to be careful about that. And so, if you get condition codes from on your edTPA, you click on this document to find out how you get support on that. Your seminar leader, your edTPA coordinator, faculty at your school cannot do it for you. It's your test. You have to contact and find out. Now, just use the handbook. Read your handbook. Read your handbook. I hope you have a good day.